Hello, this video is for IXL Activity G.S.7 Area and Circumference of Circles. The 3-character code for this activity is Zulu Delta X-ray. So the question asks, the radius of a circle is 4 centimeters. What is the circumference? Well, it would be helpful if we knew the formula for that, and there is a formula for circumference, and there's also a formula for area. And you'll notice this activity is titled Area and Circumference of Circles. So let's first talk about what is the formula for the circumference of a circle. Well, the formula for the circumference is 2r pi, where 2 is part of the equation. The r is the radius, and pi, well, it actually has a numerical value, and for many of the IXL activities they're going to want you to use 3.14. However, for this activity it says give the exact answer in simplest form, and in simplest form is actually using the value of pi. So for this activity on all of these questions, there is a button underneath each of the answers that has the pi symbol. So you can put all of your answers in terms of pi, and by clicking on that button and using that button there for the value of pi. So we're not actually going to be using the 3.14, and actually pi is a irrational number. It's not just 3.14, it's 3.14 with a whole bunch of other numbers, a long string of numbers, and I think somebody's calculated it out to like the 30 some odd decimal places or something like that. It's like crazy. So you can't actually like use it to get an exact answer because it's an irrational number. So using the pi button would give you an exact answer, and that's what they're talking about whenever they're talking about simplest form. They want it in terms of pi. So circumference is 2r pi. Now the area of a circle is equal to pi r squared. Now what do you notice about these two formulas? They're kind of alike in a way, right? They both have pi in it. They both have r for radius, and they both have a 2. However, with circumference, the 2 is a factor, and the area, the 2 is an exponent. So if you remember, you got a 2, a pi, and an r in each of them. In circumference, the 2 is a factor. In the formula for area, the 2 is an exponent that is tied to the value of the radius. So they're asking for circumference here, so let's go circumference is equal to 2r pi. And you'll notice that, well, first I guess we need to talk about what is the radius. The radius is the distance from the middle of the circle, the exact middle, the distance from the middle of the circle out to any point on the circumference, that is the border around the outside here. So whether we go from this point to this point, or whether we went from here to here, or whether we would go from here to here, either way, for this particular example, the radius would be 4 centimeters. All the way around, it's going to be the same. You can almost picture just spinning this thing around. It's going to be the same length, and the end of that line is always going to be right on the circumference of the circle. It's the same length all the way around. That is indeed the radius. Now, sometimes we have a diameter, and the diameter is twice the radius. That's because the diameter is a line that goes from one side of the circle to the other, and it passes through the middle. So notice that if that's the case, then if from here to here is 4 centimeters, then from here to here must be another 4. That means that if we double the radius, that we then get the diameter. So you could always change the circumference, and some people prefer to use it this way, is diameter times pi, where d is the diameter. So either one that you use, I have a tendency to like to use the radius concept, because whenever we get to area, that notice that r is being squared instead of doubled. The r in the area formula is being squared, unlike where it's just being doubled in the formula for circumference. So since area is in terms of radius, and we'll get into questions where we'll have to use circumference to get to the area, etc., those type of things, I kind of like to think of the first one here all the time. So if you're somebody that likes to do diameter pi, then you'll be okay on that. So let's go ahead, and in this case they give us the radius, so let's go ahead and use the c equals 2 times the radius, which is 4 times pi. Well, let's go ahead and multiply the 2 times 4 and get 8. Bring down our pi. Now they want it in simplest terms. That means that they want us to use pi here. Now, in some activities, you might have 8, and then you have to multiply times pi and call that 3.14, not 3.13. Let me change that, 3.14. And if we did that, that would give us a product of 8 times 3.14, and that gives us a product of c equals 25.12. And just to demonstrate how that is not necessarily exact, I'm going to go ahead and do 8 times, and then finding pi on my calculator. It's been a little, there it is, shift key and the caret. And if I actually use the pi button and then hit enter, it would actually give me c equals 25.132, etc. So it's just a little bit different, little off, but we're not going to go there today. They want it in terms of simplest form, so they mean in terms of pi. So when they say simplest form, and if your teacher says in terms of something, like if they say in terms of pi, that means they actually want you to use the pi symbol. Don't plug in the 3.14. Don't hit the pi button on your calculator and then round some decimals. They actually want you to use the pi button. So we're going to do 8 and then click on the pi button down there, and the answer is 8 pi. On the next one, they tell us that the diameter of a circle is 14 inches. What is the circumference? Well, remember we have two formulas for circumference. We have 2r pi, where we're going to double the radius. But if we double the radius, what do we get? We indeed get the length of the diameter. So might be a good idea to go ahead and use this one here. So we'll go ahead and do that. We're going to do c equals diameter pi. And now they want to know what is their circumference. So c equals, what is the diameter? 14, bring down pi, and wait a second, is that the answer? Indeed it is. There's no calculation to do. It's just going to be 14 pi. Remember, down here is that button for pi. Just click that button to insert the pi symbol in. On the next one, they're going to give us the radius. So circumference equals 2r pi. And I'm going to go ahead and use the radius formula this time, because that's what they're giving us is radius. So c equals 2, plug in the radius of 2, pi, just moving all that down, substituting in the value of 2 for r, getting that from right here, right? And now let's do 2 times 2 is 4. Bring down pi, it's in terms of pi, so our answer is 4 pi. That is the circumference. Now we get to area. So remember the formula for area? Area equals 2 pi r. Actually, it doesn't. I got so stuck on circumference. There we go. Pi r square. It's almost like poetic. You do this enough, it's like pi r square, 2 pi r. All right, for each of them. So area equals pi r square. So area equals pi for r. We have a value of 8. I'm going to plug that in for r, and we got to square it. So let's go ahead and take area equals pi. Square 8, we get 64. Now pi 64 really isn't the way we want to enter it in. We want to switch those around and call it 64 pi. And now we're in terms of pi, so it's 64 pi. On the next question, we're given the diameter. They want to know the area. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and put down our formula. Area equals pi r squared. And now we need to know the radius. Well, they're giving us the diameter. But what do we know about the relationship between the diameter and the radius? Well, we know that the radius is 1/2 of the diameter, right? Because we're just talking about from here to here. We don't want the whole length, so half of 5. What is that? 2.5? Area equals pi times 2. Tried to do it as a fraction. I was thinking of making it any rate. 2.5, and we want to square that. So now area equals pi. Let's go ahead and square 2.5, and that's 25 times 25. You would think that I have that memorized, but no, that's wrong button push. 2.5 squared is going to give me 6.25. So area equals pi 6.25. Now I want to flip that around and put this constant of 6.25 out in front of the term pi. And go ahead and put that there. 6.25 pi. All right. Now, pi is not a, by the way, pi is not a variable. Whenever I said constant, and it's kind of like I like to put it in front of it, kind of like a leading coefficient, like a coefficient that's tied to a variable. But pi is not a variable. Pi is actually a legitimate number. It's a value, 3.14, and a whole bunch of other numbers and so forth. So don't confuse it as a variable, but you can isolate variables, and you can divide by it and get other numbers by themselves. So you can apply some mathematical operations to it, and works pretty well that way. So diameter of a circle, well, look what happened. They took our circle away. Well, we really don't need, we just need to know, right? But ask about radius or area, so we need to know radius. So they're talking about area, so let's go ahead. Area equals pi r squared. Right? So we need to know what the radius is. Well, they tell us that diameter is 18. Well, what do we know about the relationship between diameter and radius? That's right. The radius is 1/2. So in this case, the radius is going to equal 9, 1/2 of 18. Let's do area equals pi. Take that radius of 9, and we're going to square it. So now area equals pi 81, and area equals 81 pi. So 81, and remember, hit that pi button down here in the bottom, 81 pi. I know sometimes that looks like two straight lines and a straight line across. Sometimes I do squiggly, but still it's all pi, right? The circumference of a circle is 12 pi inches. What is the diameter? So now they're giving us the circumference, and we have to find the diameter. So what's the formula for circumference, right? C equals 2r pi, correct? Now, instead of plugging in over here and solving for circumference, we're actually going to plug in the circumference. They tell us that the circumference is 12 pi. So where we see circumference, we're just going to put in 12 pi. Now, that seems really strange to students sometimes to put something in over there where they're usually solving for. But we do have an unknown. 2 is part of the equation, all right? So 2 is always there. And radius is what we don't know, correct? And yeah, radius is what we don't know. Diameter. So let's put in what we know, 12 pi and 2r pi. There we go. Now, let's go ahead and divide both sides by pi. All right? So if I divide this by pi and divide this by pi, see, this is what I was talking about. It's not a variable, but it is a number. It's a factor that's being multiplied. So the pi's will cancel each other out, leaving us with 12 equals 2r. Now, we can go ahead and divide both sides by 2. 2's cancel each other. End up with r on the right, 12 divided by 2. So radius is 6, right? But they want to know what is the diameter. So if this is 6, the radius is 6, then this must also be 6. So altogether, it is 12. Now, some of you are probably thinking, wait a second. What if I just use circumference equals diameter times radius? And then I plug in 12 pi for the circumference equals d pi, divide both sides by pi. Pi's cancel each other, and I end up with 12 equals d. The diameter is 12. You could do that. No problem there. It's just which formula you use. If you use the first one here, then it takes the added step of dividing by 2. The area of a circle is 64 pi square centimeters. What is the diameter? So they're talking about area. So what's that formula for area? Area equals pi r squared. So let's plug in what we know. We know that the area is 64 pi. 64 pi equals pi r squared. Now, let's go ahead and divide by pi. Pi's cancel each other, leave me with 64. And these pi's cancel each other, leave me with r squared. Now, how do we get rid of the r squared? Well, if you did the activity about square roots and the relationships with numbers being squared, you know that if we take the square root of r squared, that we just end up with r. And what we do to one side, we need to do to the other. square root of 64? Well, 64 is a perfect square. So the square root of 64 is 8. So we know that the radius equals 8. What are they asking for? They're asking for the diameter. So now we need to go ahead and just double it, right? This is 8. So if the radius is 8, then we multiply that by 2, and we realize that the radius is 16. The circumference of a circle is 20 pi feet. What is the radius? So circumference equals, now should we use radius or diameter formula? Well, they're asking for radius, so let's go ahead and use the radius one. 2r pi. What are they telling us? 20 pi is the circumference. And no, I don't need that. I need the 20. 20 pi equals 2r pi. First step, let's get rid of pi. Divide each side by pi. Pi's cancel each other. Leaves me with 20 equals 2r. Now, let's get the radius isolated by dividing by 2. What we do to one side, do to the other. 2's cancel each other, leave me with r on the right. 20 divided by 2 is 10. The radius is 10. That's what they're asking for. Radius, 10 feet. The area of a circle is 25 pi square miles. What is the radius? So formula for area. Area equals pi r square. So we're going to have to use a square root again, right? So they're telling us the radius, or the area. Area is 25 pi equals pi r squared. So we plug in what we have, which is the area. Let's go ahead and divide by pi. And whenever we do that, pi's on the left will cancel, leaving us with 25. And the pi's on the right will cancel, leaving us with r squared. Now we're going to take the square root of r squared. What we do to one side, we're going to do to the other. Square root of r squared is just r. Square root of 25, that's a perfect square, right? Square root of 25 is 5. So we know the radius equals 5. So we'll go ahead and put that in for our answer. Final question. Again, they take the image away, but that's okay. I think they just asked the same one. Area. What's the radius? It's the same question, just in a different form, right? The area is 25 pi square miles. Area, 25 pi square inches. Miles, inches, same difference, right? And what is the radius? And they want to know what is the radius. So on this one here, we're going to get that same answer. The answer is still going to be 5. And we can work that out, right? Area equals pi r squared. Area is 25 pi equals pi r squared. We're just plugging in what they give us. They give us one thing, so we plug it into the formula. Divide by pi to get rid of the pi's. They're going to cancel each other. Leave me at 25 on the left, r squared on the right. Take the square root of r squared. What we do to one side, we're going to do to the other. That leaves me with r on the right and 5 on the left. R equals 5. All right, so those are all of my examples for IXL G.S.7 Area and Circumference of Circles. Good luck with your activity.